Enemy of the state.
An enemy of the state.
Enemy of the state.
Dank Podstash.
You're listening to Enemy of the State's Dank Podstash. Visit thedankpodstash.com where you'll find our shop, calendar of events, and more. Become a patron or BitBacker and join us in our private Discord server where you'll have access to live shows and post-show Q&As.
Business owners, you can advertise on the Dank Podstash, reach a larger audience, and make more sales. Just email us at dankpodstash@gmail.com for more details.
Welcome, fellow enemies of the state, to episode 41 of Enemy of the State's Dank Podstash. I'm your host, Nick, and I'm joined today by Dyreka Klaus. How's it going?
Good. It's actually Klaus, but
oh,
I know
sorry,
it's spelled like Klaus.
Klaus. Yeah. Well,
no, it's everybody does that.
The full German pronunciation, Klaus.
Right. Yeah. German immigrants. Yeah.
Nice.
So.
Very
At least
cool.
my adoptive family is.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, tell us a bit about you.
All right. One thing that a lot of people on Facebook or Twitter or whatever don't realize about me is that I am a disabled veteran. I'm 90% disabled. And honestly, the way that I was treated by the Navy and Navy Medical and, in the chain of command about this whole thing and the VA now, is probably like the seed from whence my anarchist philosophy flourished, because they are not good to their people. So at any rate, yes, I am a disabled veteran. I'm also a homeschooling mom. We have 4 boys. My husband's son lives in Florida with his mom, spends summers with us, but the other 3 are with us all the time. It's my oldest, and then we have 2 together. People on Facebook would be familiar with the term declavore. That's my youngest. He's a little bit feral. Yeah. So I wrote this book because
we kind of lost you a bit when you said you wrote this book. That you're, and I didn't catch it after that. But the book being "Think for Yourself: A Critical Thinking Workbook for Beginners," correct?
Yes. And that started as a lesson plan for my 11-year-old. He's a kid who deals with anxiety a little bit, comes by it honestly. My husband's the same way. So he needs these tools to help him organize how he views his environment. He has to feel like he has some control. And so I was really kind of desperate to find him a good curriculum on critical thinking, because I feel like that's the first step for people to be able to deal with anything that comes up, obstacles in their lives, things like that. Critical thinking is the first step to being able to handle that kind of stuff. But I couldn't find anything that wasn't heavily biased or was like really cartoony for very little kids, or was just too much work for what I feel like can be boiled down to a couple of pretty key concepts. So I just hand wrote a curriculum, and I keep all of his work in like spiral bound notebooks. We go through his books and stuff, and so in his notebook I just wrote out like a week and a half, kind of like spaced it out lesson plan on the basics of Aristotelian logic and critical thinking. And I was really pleased with how it turned out. So I was going to save it for his little brother. So I went and I typed it all up, and I'm one of those people. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I could have done this part better. So I fix it up, and I could have done this part better, and I fix it up. And, I was editing and adding all this practice space. Well, you saw, like 80% of the workbook is practice space. It's actually a very short read. It's only about 22 pages of information. But, and then I was talking with Jason about it on Telegram, and the idea came up that I should just self-publish it on Amazon for anybody else who was looking for the same thing, might want to use it with their kids. So it's for like early adolescents on up. Anybody from about the age of 10 on up could use this workbook.
Yeah. I think
So, you got
it's a
a chance
great
to read it, you were saying.
yeah, it's awesome. I think it's a great for adolescents, and I think it's important for adults. I think it's important for anybody and everybody. And the thing that kept going through my head as I was reading it was like, God damn, if people would read this and use all the pages of notes to actually go through it before they open their mouths online, what a better world the online space would be.
Yeah.
Myself included.
Yes, and I was well, none of us are perfect. I don't always use it either, but I know how. I just don't always.
Yeah.
And as I was writing it, I was thinking, God, if people just knew how to do this, there would be so many more philosophers in this world. There would be so many more people who don't blindly accept authority, like fiat authority, like the government. There are some natural, legitimate types of authority, like a parent-child relationship, but I am not their child, and they are not my fucking parents.
Yeah, fucking A.
And I think more people would see that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, a lot of things are played pretty fast and loose, especially people, calling themselves philosophers online. And
Right.
I'm definitely going to hit up all the notebook, the workbook part of it, and kind of try to ingrain it into my head more solidly, because you type so fast, people type their responses so fast, or even in regular conversation, people just have something off the cuff. So if you can get the information that you've gathered there and be able to apply that with kind of muscle memory with your brain right then, right there to every conversation, it'll make everything a lot better.
Exactly. And one of the things that I have to try to remember when I'm teaching my kids this is that it doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. For me, I don't know. I mean, I went to this really crunchy private school for middle school. Maybe they taught me something there that caused this, but I feel like I've always been seeking this since I was a kid. I've always been kind of seeking the more logical approach, or seeking to stand on a position based on logical consistency. So maybe they, I don't know, did something to my head at that school that predisposed me towards that. But for me, it came a little more naturally than I see it happening for, a couple of my kids. So I don't have to think about it much. I've probably just because I've been studying it for so long. It's just like second nature to me, but it can be learned. I mean, none of us are born knowing how to do this.
Yeah.
It's definitely a skill, and skills require effort. You got to put some effort into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I find that to be the more comforting route to travel through life is evaluate things based on logic. And that's not to say, completely bereft of emotion, but it's just more solid of a way to go through. It's you can prove your points. I don't know. It's just there's so many benefits to it. You take it to the correct conclusions versus if you're basing everything off of how you feel about something emotionally.
Right. And in some ways, I feel like logic is actually the more social choice than emotion, because logic is something that can be shared between human beings. I can give you the logic that I use to arrive at this, and then you can apply it through your own ability to reason, and we can see if we can find common ground that way. Emotion just that's so subjective. It's so dependent on the individual, and there's no way to make someone else feel what you're feeling, regardless of how many people try to do exactly that these days.
Yeah.
Insist that people feel the same.
Well, there's no reason not to approach an idea or a conversation logically and then part ways on it emotionally, depending on how you feel about it. It could be logically sound, but that might not be the route you want to go down. All right. So we were on talking about, agreeing on something logically, having a conversation, coming to that point, and still being able to, walk away with different opinions emotionally or something in that vein.
Right. Right. Yeah. And that's the last step of the critical thinking guidelines that I laid out. I mean, there's more than one way to do it, obviously, but I like the method based on deductive reasoning. So that's the one that I laid out in the book. And I tacked on like the optional step at the end of filtering it through, emotional preference. And at that point, as long as you acknowledge the point at which you switched from logical rationale to emotional, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can say, sure, logically, this is what makes sense to me, but maybe I've got a little damage about this, or I have a gut feeling that leads me somewhere else. That's fine, as long as you acknowledge that isn't logic.
Yeah.
And don't expect other people to agree with you on it.
My huge inner geek always brings me back to the Spock Kirk interactions on the original Star Trek series. It's a perfect example of that. There's cases in which pure logic is a great path forward for whatever decision, and then there's cases where that just won't work.
Right. Sometimes they just need Jim to take a leap of faith.
That's
and
right.
He's good at that.
Hell yeah. So, okay, you mentioned so was it your treatment in the Navy that got you disillusioned with the whole concept of government? Would you mind going into more detail about that? Because I'm always interested in, former military's path to anarchy from that state. That's interesting.
Right. Yeah. So it definitely plants a seed, or it gives you fuel for later use. I mean, it wasn't right away. You can call it Stockholm syndrome, I guess. I didn't see them as abusers for a long time, and they really were. Things like, so my medical stuff starts with, I was working at my first command in Hawaii, and we were doing tons of lifting every week because I was responsible for the DRMO program, which is the Defense Reutilization and Marketing Office. So I worked in the logistics, and we were responsible for taking all the old equipment out of the command safely according to sanitization guidelines for classified information. So like computers, we had to remove hard drives and batteries and things like that, but there was a lot of old equipment in that command. A lot of it was really heavy, old hubs, big, huge routers, like 1980s type stuff.
Yeah.
And so we were lifting hundreds of pieces of equipment every week, and my back started hurting, and I, was going to medical, trying to find out what was wrong with it. They refused to give me an MRI. My command, the doctors thought I was faking. My command thought I was faking, and that I just wanted to be home with my son. And they tried to send me to what's called XOI, or the Executive Officer's Inquiry. It's like captain's mast, but it's a step before that. So this is all non-judicial punishment in the Navy. So they tried to send me to XOI for what's called malingering. That's where you're pretending to be sick or injured to get out of work. So, I mean, they couldn't prove it. And, I'd been doing physical therapy. I'd been following all these recommendations. So they really didn't have grounds. I had, one or two doctors that were like, well, there's a problem here. We just don't know what it is. So I was able to get out of that. But, they still refused to give me an MRI. They refused to believe me about where it hurt. 3 years. Wow. I walked around like that. And then my left leg went dead. And that was after I got transferred to my new command. And then I started suffering muscle spasms that would last weeks. And for anybody who doesn't know, those are no cakewalk. The name is kind of innocuous, but it's like a seizure.
Wow.
It's like, like the worst Charlie horse you've ever had, only
Jesus.
doesn't let go for weeks.
Oh,
and it can be in really huge muscle systems. Yeah. So it's pretty bad. I mean, I've been on like 12 Percocet a day trying to deal with the pain of this shit. And it's horrible. So they did like surgery because it was herniated discs in my back that had been damaging this nerve, and they screwed up that surgery. So they had to do another one, and they screwed that one up. So they had to do another one, and all of this, and I still have permanent nerve damage in my leg. My third surgery was to repair like a cerebral spinal fluid leak that was giving me a spinal headache, like vacuum pressure in my skull. So I have migraines now and like all these problems. And the VA wanted to really screw me over on it. So I fought with them for 10 years, trying to get them to honor their goddamn contract. Because, I mean, you sign a contract, they're supposed to do certain things if they screw you up.
Wow. They just chew you up and spit you out.
Really fight. They do.
And
they
just,
do.
That's crazy that they wanted to take you through disciplinary channels without having any proof, without being able to say, no, you're clearly faking because we looked at all this. They just want to avoid any, hemorrhaging of money to you at all, it sounds like.
Well, and it's the chain of command. They didn't want the inconvenience of somebody, with a work-related medical problem. Because it doesn't come out of any of their pockets. They don't care,
Right.
But and I'm not a feminist. I really dislike feminists, especially third-wave feminists. But women really are treated like second-class citizens in the military. I wouldn't recommend any girl join, because it's just none of it is designed to like give any accommodation to women. Everything that women have for accommodation is like pulling teeth to get. You know what I mean? And then the attitudes are just horrible of the chain of command. Even women who are up in the chain of command, they act just like the assholes that treat all the other women like shit. There's always a presumption that you're not working as hard as the man. Mm-hmm. There's always a presumption that you're not as good at your job. There's always a presumption that, you're trying to get out of work and go home and be with your kids. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're guilty no matter what as a woman in the military. So yeah, I hate making those kinds of claims because I'm not a fucking victim. You know what I mean? I hate that.
Sure. Well, it just sounds like they transfer their MO to every part of government transfers, the same ideas, the same tactics to every part of itself, and applies them to everybody, no matter who you are.
And yeah. And what I can say about the military is like the worst things everybody could complain about the government and even about socialism. They are concentrated and condensed in the military. The military is like the worst of all of them put together.
Sure.
So it really is like the asshole of government.
Yeah, you're fully in. You're fully at their whims at that point.
Yep.
Crazy.
Yep. You don't even have constitutional rights anymore once you sign that dotted line.
Oh, that's a bit ironic. You don't have constitutional rights, but you're fighting to bring my freedoms to other people. So.
Right. Yeah.
That's
how the story goes anyways, isn't it?
Yeah, right. Let's jump back real quick to your book and why you wrote it and stuff. I wanted to ask you about homeschooling and what brought you to the idea of homeschooling, and if it's similar to unschooling, or if you're interested in unschooling at all. Because I don't have any experience. I don't have any kids as far as homeschooling. I plan on that at some point, but I want to gather as much info as I can from people who do have that experience.
Right. Okay. I always liked the idea of it. I knew a few kids growing up who were homeschooled because they played on my soccer team or whatever. And they always seemed really bright, and friendly and not assholes like the rest of the kids at school. So I always kind of liked the idea. And then my kids, became school age, and I hadn't thought about it in a long time. And then I saw just how subpar the education in public schools is these days, especially these days. I mean, it's just gotten worse ever since it was made compulsory. Every generation deals with a shittier school system than the last. And I didn't like being subject to somebody else's schedule. I didn't like that there was always something I had to buy, always something that had to be done. always like, I mean, these other people just running every aspect of our lives, and the homework in the evenings, and how much of our day, how much of my child's day should they be allowed to consume? You know what I mean? And it fucking bothered me. So I started looking into it, and, you know, the more libertarian I got to, the more I liked the idea. I wasn't, you know, I'm a voluntarist now is what I would probably say. But the more libertarian I got, the more I liked the idea. I don't like being subject to the state.
Yeah.
And any way that I can not be subject to the state, I'm going to do my best to achieve that. So for when they were much younger, we kind of did an unschooling type of thing, you know, where it was just, we played a lot. That's almost all we did until they had like solid interests in something. And then I'd be like, okay, well, if you want to get into that, you're going to have to learn how to read. So here, let's sit down and start learning how to read. And okay, great, because it was something they wanted to do.
Yeah.
It was pretty easy to teach them. And then as they got older, you know, they have plans for their lives. So they do need more, in my opinion, my kids anyways, need more formal kind of book learning if they're going to be pursuing some of these interests of theirs. My oldest is going to be a pilot. And my middle one, he's only 11, but he does a lot of like computer animation and video editing and things like that. He's
cool.
he's super into filmmaking.
Nice.
So, but, you know, they need kind of like general education for the things they want to do. So what I started doing was I started ordering used textbooks from a site called thebackpack.com. And I can get like a year's worth of books for one kid for like $50. Nice. These are like old, the ones that I get anyways. I get publishing dates in like the 60s, or I mean the 70s, 80s, 90s. And I do that on purpose because the shit they're pushing in schools these days has gotten weird. So my kids are going to get basically the same education that I got.
Yeah.
But we're going to do it on our terms.
Mm-hmm.
So we work out of those older textbooks, you know, and but we're in Virginia, so we homeschool under the religious exemption.
Oh, cool.
Which means that I tell them that once and they never bother me again. Ever.
Nice. I was going to ask about that.
I don't have to turn in test scores.
Yeah, if there was a lot of government overreach still into that, but it seems like you found a good loophole.
Yeah, not here in Virginia. Well, even without the religious exemption, Virginia's what's called a parents' rights state. And if you're really into learning about the different states and stuff, I recommend checking out the Homeschool Legal Defense Association website, HSLDA. And if you are going to be homeschooling, I recommend becoming a member. But they have information on the laws of every state. So in Virginia, it's what's called a parents' rights state. So parents Virginia recognizes a parent's right to educate their children, their children as they see fit. So all you have to do is notify the school district. You don't have to get their permission. They don't have to sign off on it. You just send them a notice of intent and kind of like a general idea of what you plan to teach. And you can just print their own standards of learning off for that from, the Virginia Department of Education website and just turn it in. And then at the end of the year, they ask that you submit some kind of what's called proof of progress. So you can like submit a portfolio of what your child has done, or the easiest way, it's kind of a jury rigging way, is you get the easiest standardized test in the nation, the California Achievement Test. You can order it online. You can proctor it at your house, in your kitchen table, and then you send the thing in and they grade it, and then you turn that in as proof of progress. And it's ridiculously easy.
Wow.
But if you want to avoid all the paperwork and the hassle, just homeschool under the religious exemption, which is what we do.
That's so crazy to me that there's a whole legal defense set up for people that don't want their kids in the system. That's such a fight to keep your kids out of government schools. That's nuts. And yeah, I'm aware of that before,
and
but
they're
geez.
a national organization.
That's insane. And there's there's some places
They
you
have
can't
partner
even do
lawyers
that.
in, I think, every state. Right.
It's so crazy.
Or they have some policy allowing it, but it's way too difficult for the average person to access. You know, they've made it all but banned anyways, just by making it too difficult with their requirements.
Sure.
So,
yeah, and it seems like
I don't know if it's actually illegal.
No, and even if it's not illegal in letter, you know, you see those stories of people who've submitted all the right paperwork. They have to jump through all these hoops, and they either reject it or say they lost it or ignore it and still come try to take their kids. It's sickening.
Right. And New York is infamous for that.
Oh,
so you see a lot of those stories out of New York.
I could never live in New York or California for that matter. It just sounds awful.
Me neither.
I don't know how all you ANFAM out there do that, but
I mean, I grew up in Oregon, and I don't feel like I could live back there. Right?
Yeah, Oregon even seems sketch.
Yeah, I don't know if I could move back there. You know, I don't know if I could put up with living there again. I love the state. It's so beautiful, and it's home to me, but the politics, I don't think I could put up with it. I'd end up going killdozer or something if I lived in Oregon.
Well, it seems like here in Washington and Oregon, and it seems like in a lot of places, there's a few counties, you know, where they decide the political leanings of the rest of the state, and everybody else is against that or just wants to be left alone. It seems like a good starting point for something. What, I'm not sure if there's enough people who are interested in shoving it off, or if they're okay with just kind of ignoring it, then we might not have a good jumping off point, but it's something to think about for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a reason to be talking to people too. I mean, you know, a lot of people be like, oh, what are you doing talking on Facebook? That's not going to accomplish anything. You're wasting your time. I'm really not. I mean, I could count probably 10 people who are voluntarists now just because I took the time to talk to them. So, or, you know, they saw something that I put out and it made them think. It's not pointless. Talking to people is never pointless. Trying to find common ground is never pointless.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why people say that it is.
It amazes me the numbers of likes that a lot of, anarchists, libertarian, voluntarists, whatever pages get, whether they be meme pages or not. Because not all those tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of people are anarchists, but they're seeing the ideas. They're seeing the philosophy behind it, so that's something.
I mean, that's how I ended up. That was kind of like the shove, the push, the catalyst, whatever you want to call it, that I needed, is I started following Jason's page, Wolf in the Sheeple's World, like right at the very beginning when he first put it up years ago. I think it had like maybe 1,500 followers when I started following it. Maybe 3 months after he started it. It has like 54,000 now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's an admin over there, but I'm not on it.
That's Jason Booth we're talking about for everybody listening. So definitely go check out A Wolf in a Sheeple's World. Great page, great dude, for sure. So that kind of...
It's an informative page too. It's not just a meme page.
Absolutely.
Like, he always puts up a lot of good information.
Absolutely. So talking about the certain small areas of states that kind of control the rest of it, that is one reason why I too am into sustainability, prepping, that kind of stuff. Because if there is a pushback and there's retaliation for that pushback, it stands to reason that you should be prepared, and not just for any crazy situation, you know, economic collapse, boogaloo, what have you, but just natural disaster, life. You should be prepared. I think I talked about this with Jason on the show. It doesn't hurt to be prepared with, you know, multiple weeks or months of food and water. You never know when you're going to have an ice storm, power outage, anything like that. I'd imagine that's kind of... Yeah.
We're subject to hurricanes here.
Yeah, anything like that.
So,
what got you started going down that path?
I've always kind of been oriented that way, I think. You know, I mean, when I was a kid, it was about keeping, you know, snacks in my nightstand drawer instead of having to walk all the way to the kitchen. I better be prepared. I want to be, you know, ready ahead of time if I want a snack. And it's always been kind of about looking forward and planning. I'm a planner. I've always been a planner. And I can think of 10 to 15 different like societal collapse scenarios, even just temporary ones like natural disasters. We saw it with Katrina, we see it with all these hurricanes that come through. And I'm responsible for my family, for feeding them, for making sure, that the kids and the dogs have food and water, and that everybody's going to be okay. Maybe not happy, but we'll survive.
Yeah.
So I feel like parents who don't prep a little bit are kind of irresponsible, honestly. I mean, if you're a single person and you're not prepping, it's maybe not that big a deal. You're probably going to be bugging out anyways. Knowing some dead reckoning and how to live off the land a little bit will probably suffice for you. A couple of tools and stuff. But with a family, you just can't do that. You got to bug in. So you need to be prepared. You need to have supplies. So yeah, emergency medical supplies, food, water, things like that. I like to stock up on those things.
Yeah.
Guns and ammo, of course, because there's always going to be looters if something big happens. We've seen it. We've literally seen it.
Allegedly.
In the aftermath of natural disasters.
Allegedly, guns and ammo. There may be a lake that contains all that nearby from your last boating excursion, I'm sure. But
right. Well, I live like 4 miles from the Potomac. I think I might have dropped them in there.
Yep.
So.
Got it. Those damn boating accidents. It's good that you mentioned bugging in. Hardly anyone talks about bugging in. Everybody talks about bugging out. And in writing kind of a plan and information thing, I call it a red file, a book, folder with everything that my group and family would need in a shit hits the fan scenario. Through the research doing that, bugging in is generally like 90% of the time the safer option, and sometimes the only option, like you mentioned, if you have a family. And you're not going to be able to haul all your preps if you plan on bugging out, but sometimes you got to do that. That's something I think people should definitely look into, is bugging in versus bugging out, and picking your location for that.
Right. And that's, we're trying to get our place, kind of to a position where that wouldn't be that big of an issue for us. And our property is already ready in some ways to be sustainable. We're having a solar array installed now. We have gravity fed septic. I want to sink a well and see if we can get an artesian well on the property, because that doesn't require electricity. I planted the orchard. We're planting the vegetable garden, things like that. And I want nut trees like hazelnuts. That's easy protein to store. Really easy protein to store. Stuff like that. We only have like 2.25 acres, but we're semi-rural. I would say we're in a neighborhood, but kind of out in the sticks. So yeah, we have plenty of room to get that all ready and things like that. I would like to get a freeze dryer.
Yeah.
So I can be preserving, from our orchard and vegetable garden.
Canning, dehydrating, freeze drying. Yeah, that's awesome. We do a bit of that here as well. Yeah. Got to expand though. It's a never ending expansion once you start preparing any of that. Right. It is. It's fun too.
It becomes a passion. You become a little consumed by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah,
you got it.
I do a lot of canning and stuff like that.
Hell yeah! The first thing you got to do if shit hits the fan is knock down that fucking monument that you've posted about on Facebook, so you quit drawing people there.
Right. For real. I don't know why anybody gives a fuck that John Wilkes Booth walked across my property, but apparently somebody cared enough to put a damn marker up in the middle of the night without my knowledge or permission.
I mean, that's so weird. If there was like wet concrete they left footprints in, that's maybe something. But it's like, oh man, I saw him running over there. We got to put up a fucking statue. Come check this out, dude. There's a statue of where he walked.
Right. There's this old driveway that you can still kind of see where it ran through our property. And it went back to the farm that he went at to seek sanctuary that night after crossing the Potomac. So You can still kind of see the driveway, but I mean, Jesus, he just walked on it. Holy shit.
Yeah. Yo, check out this
I don't
driveway.
understand the fascination.
Yeah, that's really weird.
Right. So cool.
So what's up with your
So
second book?
strange.
I know you had hoped to have it finished by the time we did the show, but we can still talk about it, even though I haven't gotten a chance to read it.
Right. Yeah, that one's going to be speak for yourself, and it's going to be about rational communication. So it's going to be about taking what you learned in the first book and organizing it in such a way that that you're engaging peaceful communication and you are communicating your ideas without, without presenting anything that could distract your target. So like no emotional outbursts and things like that. Just laying your stuff out in an organized fashion for other people to take in. And that's an important skill that's been lost to a lot of society. So that, and then I actually am planning a third one as well. That's going to be Act for Yourself. And it's going to be about making plans based on, what you learned in the first book, what you learned from other people in the second book, and making plans for your life and sticking to them, or at least realizing where the blame lies if you don't. And you don't, if you don't act based on your best conclusions through critical thinking, realize that the emotional decisions you made, you might get more negative results. So that's what the third book is going to be about. Just kind of everything I want my kids to know, A to Z, about approaching life with, a logical outlook instead of just reacting to life. I want them to take control of their own lives.
That's awesome. I like the theme there. The theme focusing on the individual. Think for yourself, speak for yourself, act for yourself. That's awesome. I'll be grabbing all three of those for sure for my future schooling of my future children. That's awesome.
Off because I don't know. You always think summer's going to be downtime, but it never is. There's always so much other stuff going on in the summer with kids. It's just nonstop. I got kids learning how to drive. I got one that just got his first job. We're all over the place. So,
well, hopefully the one
maybe
learning how to drive. Maybe when
things calm down when the school year starts.
Yeah. Hopefully nobody's jetting off to Area 51 anytime soon. First-time drivers. I had to find a transition for that. What do you think about all that?
I don't know if people are actually going to do it. I don't think anybody actually shows up. It's just a fun internet thing, in my opinion, that people want to feel like they're part of. Maybe some do, though. I mean, there's always a couple of crazies who think it's really going down.
Yeah.
And good fucking luck to them. Somebody queue up taps on the one MC for these guys.
I want to see it happen.
It's not going to go how they think it's going to go.
I want to see it happen. I love the idea of people being like, yeah, we can fucking walk into a government facility. Fuck them. How are they going to stop us? And I'm willing to keep tabs. I've been thinking about
guns, lots of them.
Yeah, exactly. But and that could go multiple ways if they decide to take that route. At least culturally, it could cause some stuff. I actually saved a little thing I found on Facebook today that says Storm Area 51 will either be the most successful government takeover of all time or the biggest fucking graveyard home to the bravest Americans with the IQ of a straw. So that, yeah, if people get mowed down, they're going to spin it, one of two ways. It's going to be more control, more authoritarian control, or it's going to be people getting a little disillusioned with the way the government works, which people are already, but that'll be huge.
Yeah. And I think if it actually goes down and people actually get killed, a whole bunch of people, I feel like that's going to be a huge catalyst, because I don't know how most people view Area 51 as just like something that's unnecessarily secret. Everybody wants to know what's in there. You know what I mean? I don't think a lot of Americans believe that the secrets in there are worth using deadly force to protect.
Right.
I think they would see that as definitely being overkill. I think it would piss a lot of people off if they hurt anybody. So, yeah, but all I know is I'm like the Michael Jackson popcorn gift guy, you know, like I can't wait to see how it shakes out. But I don't care enough about what's in Area 51 and want to be part of it, quite frankly.
I want to go. I want to be the popcorn guy, but at the area. I'm thinking about seeing if
like in a lawn chair, like right outside the border of the base.
Shit, I want to film it happening. I want to film it for posterity. But I'm thinking about doing this will be the first announcement for all you listeners. If we get, I'm gonna set a Patreon goal. If we hit a Patreon goal and y'all can get me there, I'll give you fucking Area 51 t-shirts, live coverage if I can, and if not live coverage, you'll get exclusive coverage from the Pod Stash. So let's see if we can get this going. I want to see what's up.
And I'm not that curious. I've got my little life that I'm really busy with, and I get why people think it would be fun or find the idea entertaining or even galvanizing, but it's just not for me. Mm-hmm. I'll watch. If somebody live streams it, I'll watch.
Hell yeah. It's like they say, it's like the fall of the Roman Empire, but with Wi-Fi. We're living it.
I know, I love that. I always love that quote.
Well, and it's, too, the idea behind it of saying, fuck the government, we're going to go in here if we want to, and whether or not you're going to face, 50 cows, whatever, that the idea behind it, I think, is good. It's a good idea to foster, and it kind of brings up, I don't know his name, but there's a guy that took fire bombs of some sort. They wouldn't say what they were, incendiary bombs, I don't know what, but I would imagine it was Molotovs, and a rifle to an ICE facility in Tacoma, I believe yesterday at some point.
Right.
Think about if we were able to get the
guy. Right.
Supposedly, I don't know I can't confirm that. I haven't read if he has a manifesto or not, and of course the mainstream media is going to call him whatever they can to smear him, but
true.
If we could apply this, all the memes, because the memes in Area 51 are powerful as fuck. That's what's drawing a ton of people into it. And then the idea behind it to something like that, to an actual, well, I mean, not that whatever's in Area 51 isn't something that everybody should know about if there is anything, but imagine freeing people, either financially or physically freeing people who don't deserve to be in prison. Imagine if we did that for Ross Ulbricht. I think Jason Booth.
Ross Ulbricht?
Yeah. I think Jason posted something about that this morning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Snowden. Mm-hmm. Assange. We've got a lot of people that could use this kind of support. I mean, when I first saw the Area 51 thing, I was like, well, maybe that's how it starts. I don't know. I mean, you get enough people together over something that's kind of joke fun, and then maybe people, I don't know, realize their own power finally, and maybe this kind of support gets thrown behind actual righteous causes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I'd love to see. I think it's a good wave to ride for sure. It just depends on if it's actually a thing or if it's just a meme. But I don't know. This shows the potential of getting people together behind one idea, for sure. A lot of fucking people with a lot of different backgrounds too.
One of my problems with the idea is just that I'm not a fan of mobs, just because they almost always turn violent, and I'm not. I think that that many people could just walk into somewhere and just by the sheer volume of their presence get what they're after without violence. I'm not for, I never advocate for violence. I realize the state is violent against us, but most people don't realize that. It's not one of those things most people are ready to accept the concept of. So I feel like I do my position more damage if I respond to their violence with violence, because statists will only see my violence. They won't see the state's violence. And so then they'll think that everybody who shares my philosophy is violent, and that it's chaos and disorder and all that kind of stuff. I feel like it's self-defeating. But I mean, at some point, wars get fought. It happens. I
Yeah.
understand, but it's it takes all kinds, and I'm just not that kind.
It seems like there's just so many different ways this could be spun or things could go. And if it's going to go down, I do think it's important to have people there who can cover it in a way that the mainstream media wouldn't, because they're going to be out there. If even 1,000 people show up out there, mainstream media is going to be there. You need more alternative people out there looking at this and putting out what we're talking about, the possibilities behind all of this. It's something that people could think about, because storming, say, the fucking White House or something like that. What is that going to do? You're definitely going to get taken out that way, and it's definitely going to be viewed as an act of aggression from people who don't realize, like you said, that the state is violence. But going somewhere like a detention center where Ross Ulbricht is, or other people who haven't committed any actual crimes, who deserve to be innocent, and going in and saying, nah, they're coming out, and you're not going to stop us.
Right. When you have like an actual point that almost anybody really could agree with, when you have a really righteous, like, specific aim, I don't see a problem with, getting together and trying to achieve that. I feel like kind of directionless, just, we hate the state stuff. I don't feel like that, accomplishes anything.
Yeah, tactics.
Do something that you can accomplish. Yeah.
Yeah,
do
absolutely.
Something that you can accomplish, something that you can actually, achieve a solid and definite win on.
Yep.
That's my position anyways.
We're gonna need to apply some critical thinking to
I am a mom, I've got kids, and
to the rewards and repercussions of storming Area 51, because I think there's negative and positive on both sides.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I'm not the action person. I'm just not. I've got my kids to raise and stuff, and I'm kind of crippled anyway.
Hey, that's a hell of an action.
I'm more of the thinker.
Raising them outside of the state abusive and brainwashing system is one of the most solid actions you can take. You're creating the next generation of free thinkers.
That's true, and I honestly feel like that's the war that needs to be won.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one that I want to focus my energy on, because I feel like the more people raise their children to be free thinkers, at some point government will just become obsolete, because nobody will believe in it anymore, or not enough people. It'll be like 90% of the population is kind of woke, and there'll always be that small percentage that wants somebody else to run everything.
Yeah.
But with the government, it's such a conflict of interest, and I don't know why people can't see it. Letting the government educate your children is the biggest conflict of interest there is. Why wouldn't they use that to churn out barely functional, obedient tax chattel?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. No, making the government obsolete, kids. That's you build a better product outside of it. You build stronger communities outside of it. You build stronger minds outside of it. That's why I love agorism so much. I had this conversation with another friend this morning before the show. We're building parallel to the the ultimate goal of making them obsolete, of shrinking the state to the point where they can't do anything.
Right. And they obviously, the state doesn't like that, because they don't want us to not need them. Mm-hmm. All the status arguments against anarchy or voluntaryism or whatever you want to call it are always about how society needs government. I think we can prove that we don't. I don't think it has to even be violent. I think it's going to be more along the lines of evolution. Yeah. In my opinion, evolution is going to be really the only way that it can be sustainably achieved. And that's evolution of education, essentially. We have to stop letting them control the education of future generations.
Well, that's where everything springs forward from.
That's the first step.
Absolutely. It's where everything springs forward from, whether it's education of future generations or education of ourselves in finding the path outside of government, the path to build, the communities to build, all that stuff. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah. Well,
Yep.
that brings us to what we got to call the end of the show. We're at an hour. I got so much upload time. We got so much to talk about.
All right.
But we'll do some after hours discussions and possibly a small clip for my idea for episode 50 of the Dank Pod Stash, which is coming up in 9 episodes. So stay tuned for that. And thank you very much for coming on. This is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, we'll catch you all later.
All right. Peace.
Omnipresent, what anarchy